We are going to energise the country.
Stop Brexit.
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Seamus, I'm not sure this is a great idea, is it?
Order!
Hello and welcome to the Debated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will. And in this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by a member of the Labour Party who's also involved with Hope Not Hate and the West Midlands Strategic Policing and Crime Board, and he's also standing for the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party. It's Gurinder Singh Josan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Will. Thank you for having me on.
So, to begin with, first of all, I'd like to ask, what did you think of the result of the recent general election?
Disappointing, probably an understatement. I think everybody in the Labour Party, we joined the party because we have beliefs and we want to see change in our community for the better, and we want to see policies implemented that we believe in, that we believe will make things better for people around us. But we also know that the only way we can do that is by winning a general election. So to have our fourth general election defeat on the trot is very disappointing. It just means that for another 5 years, we can talk about things, we can discuss things, our parliamentarians can oppose the government, but actually we're not in a position to implement the change that we know so desperately needed in our communities.
Do you think that there was one particular reason behind the defeat, or do you think it was a mixture of factors that resulted in the defeat?
I think there was a mixture of factors. I think anybody says it's one particular thing hasn't been out on the doorstep much. I think clearly Brexit was a problem for us, and I think a problem for us in different ways in different places. The position in terms of our leader and people's view of Jeremy Corbyn was a problem with many people. But I think there are also some other factors as well. And that Labour Party hasn't perhaps recognised and understood the change within our communities, and certainly within some of our heartland communities over the years, and how that has now affected our support at the ballot box.
Now, of course, the leadership campaign for the Labour Party is underway now. We've had hustings and we've had candidates announcing and some candidates dropping out. What are your thoughts on the candidates in general terms? Is there a particular candidate you're considering backing? What are your thoughts on the campaign so far?
I think it's been an interesting campaign. I think there's been a broad cross-section of views put forward by different candidates. And I think that's welcome. I would not want to support anybody who comes across as continuity in terms of what we're doing currently. I don't think that helps. I think there has to be a recognition that there's got to be some fundamental thinking going on and some real changes, both in terms of our offer, but also in terms of our organisation as well. And that has to be crucial. So, I was, being from the West Midlands, I was interested with Jess Phillips' candidacy. I thought there was somebody there who actually spoke to a section of the communities out there that we do need to engage with, and was somebody who actually was able to speak out in a way and connect with people in a way in this age of media that is helpful. So I thought her candidacy was very interesting. I also think Lisa Nandy is speaking she's speaking about a cross section of voters that we perhaps haven't given much consideration to in recent times. So overall, I'm reluctant to go with anybody who continuity, and that at the moment it looks more than out of all of them, like Rebecca Long-Bailey, both in terms of her support base, but also some of the things she's saying and some of the things her supporters are saying as well. So think I'll certainly be giving a vote to Lisa Nandy and Keir Starmer and Emily Thornberry, but I'm not sure which order at the moment. That's the bit I'm decided on. And I think in this election, the transfers are going to be crucial. I think this is, despite what the polls are saying, I think this is going to be quite close, and the transfers are going to be really important.
What are your thoughts on the deputy leadership contest? Because, of course, we're having in the Labour Party seeing a deputy leadership battle at the moment. Were there any particular candidates that you thought stood out from the field to you?
Well, again, I'm quite impressed by the diverse kind of political kind of background of the candidates. I'm really pleased with that. I'm pleased that we've got BAME candidates as well. Because at one point it looked like we were going to have BAME candidates. I mean, there's some of them stand out for different reasons. Ian Murray stands out. He's our sole Labour MP in Scotland for the second time now, and he won with a good majority this time. And there's something to be said about having somebody who knows how to win elections when all else around them aren't doing that. There's, in terms of the role of the deputy leader, in terms of our party's organisation, there's something to be said for that. And also something to be said for kind of connecting with those parts of the UK which we absolutely need to win to form a general election. So without winning seats in Scotland, we can't. It's very difficult for Labour to win to win a majority in the UK Parliament. So there's something to be said for that. Rosina Allen Khan, really a fresh face and somebody who's talking about things in a very different way from BAME background, but again a very different kind of BAME perspective as well. I've been quite impressed by some of the stuff she's been saying. Angela Rayner seemed to be much ahead of everybody else at the moment in terms of the deputy leadership. But again, I'd be a little bit worried about the continuity aspect. I think there needs to be some change. But I think, as the campaign's going on, we're seeing her kind of emphasising her independence more than anything else. So, those are the kind of things that stand out for me.
Speaking of the potential for change and of continuity, one of the things that some people felt perhaps was an issue in this campaign for the Labour Party was the Manifesto. Were there any particular policies that you think, on reflection, shouldn't have been in the Manifesto, or do you think that there were some policies that needed to be highlighted more, that would have attracted more people? What are your feelings on that subject?
I think overall we had a good manifesto. Like in 2017, there's not much in the manifesto that I disagree with, and I don't think there's many Labour Party members who would disagree with much in the manifesto. I think where we lacked was an overall kind of narrative, which actually simplified the message for voters out there, because Labour Party members, those of us who are activists, we would pick up that document, or we would download it online, and we would actually wade through it and read it and understand it. But actually, voters won't do that, and we're relying on campaigning methods, and we're relying on media to get our message out. And having a long document with lots of policies in there isn't conducive to that. There has to be an underlying narrative, and there has to be some key messages that stand out. So, the Conservatives did it really well with their message on Brexit, and I think that's where we failed. I think the other thing, which has been picked up by a lot of people, is that adding things on as the campaign went on just didn't seem right. You've gone through a process, you've agreed your manifesto, and now you're saying you're going to do this, and now you're saying you're going to do that. It just didn't sound plausible. And I think for an electorate that was sceptical, for a Conservative message that was striking home with a lot of our core voters, that then just gave people the easy option to say, well, actually, we can't trust Labour. There's some don't add up, actually, when the reverse could have been the truth. I think that's where we went wrong. And I think going forward, we really do need to look at what is our core purpose for being, what is our core message, what is our core offer to voters out there. And it's not something you can define in one word, but it has to be, it has to be something short, and it has to be something that can be gotten across in current modern day campaigning methods.
Do you think going forward then that the Labour Party has to focus more on the way it communicates, in so much as that, as you mentioned, modern methods of campaigning, which include Twitter, Facebook, that sort of thing? Do you think that there has to be more emphasis placed on that, the manner of communication, than there has been in the past few years?
I think we've got to be alive to the fact that campaigning is changing over time. Now, I'm fully one of those people who absolutely believes that the best form of campaigning is direct contact with voters and talking to them face to face on the doorstep, and speaking to them directly. It's something I love doing. So it's something which I think has the best results. But people, not everybody is of that view, and not everybody has the time to spend standing on their doorstep talking to a campaigner or an activist from a party. And people do get their news and views in different ways. So it's important, and part of the Labour Party's overall organisation and our strategy is we need to understand how things are changing over time, and we need to be working out how best to get our message across within all those methods. I don't think there's a silver bullet that this is what we failed to do and this is what we need to do next time. But we do need to understand it better, and we do need to make sure that our resources are put in the right place. We need to make sure that the message is consistent and is appropriate for the media and the campaigning method we're using. And we need to make sure that we've got the skills and talent within our and we have within our activist base to be able to make use of all those things.
Just moving now on to your campaign to be elected to the NEC. You've previously stood for the NEC. Is there anything that you're going to be doing this time in standing that will be different from your previous attempts to be elected?
This is a by-election, and it's not something that was it's not something I planned to stand in, but kind of decided quite late. Actually, I will do it. I stood the previous two times, and there were much longer campaigns. So this time, and there was much more interest as well, particularly on social media and stuff, and a lot more people contacting me, even at this stage of the previous campaigns, asking my views on certain things. But in this one, it seemed to be that all the bandwidth has been taken up by the leadership campaign, and then you can perhaps understand that. In terms of what I'll be putting out some more information about what my views are on some of the issues we've already discussed about the general election, what went wrong, but also what we need to do going forward. And some of my views in relation to things like anti-Semitism, in terms of the complaint stealing of the processes of the party, in terms of where I think organisation is deficient, and that's something I've concentrated on in previous NEC campaigns. Is I put forward ideas about how I think the party can change its organisation to, in a number of ways, in terms of policy making, in terms of engaging with members, in terms of retaining members, also recruiting, in a whole host of ways. We need to constantly be refreshing ourselves, because the environment out there is changing all the time, and we need to reflect that.
Now, you mentioned anti-Semitism. Of course, that is something that has dogged the Labour Party for the past few years, and has been a real problem both internally and externally. What do you think is going to be the best method to exercise this issue, or to deal with this issue in a way that ensures that anti-Semitism is not a part of the Labour Party going forward?
I think there's two things on the horizon. I don't hold any hope that the current leadership or the current NEC will resolve this issue. They haven't up to now, and they've left us in the situation we're in. So the two things on the horizon: one is we're going to have a new leadership, and we're going to have a determination at some point by the Equality Human Rights Commission about the investigation they're looking at into the Labour Party. So those two things are going to be key. Ultimately, it is absolutely disgraceful that the Labour Party is in the situation we are in. You know? There is no place for racism of any kind. There is absolutely not. And with my we're coming from a BAME community, with my activism in terms of hope and hate and other things, it's absolutely disgusting that we're in this situation. And I think the fundamental thing is you have to have a very clear no tolerance policy about anti-Semitism and about any kind of racism. Yeah? That's the first thing. And then you have to implement it and you have to police it. Yeah? You cannot give any mixed messages in things like this. You cannot, political expediency cannot come in the way. That this has to, you cannot sacrifice the qualities on the altar of factional purity. It just cannot be allowed. It's just because somebody might be of your political viewpoint, they cannot be allowed to get away with some of the things we've been seeing in the party. And it doesn't take a long time to make these judgments. If that's your, part of the problem being is the number of, and the scale of complaints that the party is having to deal with. Well, why did we allow it to get that big? Why didn't we send a very clear message right at the beginning? So actually, people who had anti-Semitic views and thoughts, and they've always existed, but we've kind of given the message that actually it's okay to be anti-Semitic in the Labour Party. And that's how it's been allowed to proliferate. And it's been allowed to be done in the name of the leader and of left-wing politics. And ultimately, that's where the strong message has to come from there. And it's absolutely unforgivable we're in this situation. And I've seen some of the abuse that some of our excellent MPs, particularly female MPs, Jewish female MPs, have faced. It's fundamentally wrong, and for the party to not dealt with it, it's just unforgivable.
To what extent do you think that the current NEC has been involved in not fully doing their job? I mean, do you think it's down to them, the issue, or do you think it's down to the leadership, or a combination? What do you think is the core root of why this issue hasn't been dealt with sooner?
I think it's both. I think it's there had to have been a clear message from the leader, but also the NEC is the body that's in charge of putting processes in place and overseeing new things. And actually, I think there's too many people. The NEC at the moment is serving a political purpose for the leader, and is more interested in doing that than dealing with the issue of anti-Semitism. If it was serious about dealing with the issue of anti-Semitism, then it could have done so a long time ago.
Just moving on, what would be your main priorities if you were elected to the NEC?
I think we need to understand the lessons of this general election defeat and our fourth general election defeat. We need to understand that, and we need to work out a proper plan in terms of how we get back to a position or how we're going to win in 5 years' time. But actually, if you're saying immediate, then we've actually got we haven't got 5 years. We've got what is it, 3 months till the local elections in the West Midlands. We've got the West Midlands mayoral election. We've got police and crime commissioner elections. We've got LGA elections in London. We've got elections in May. So we haven't got a lot of time to put things right. We cannot afford to be in a situation where, on the back of our fourth general election defeat, we now have a whole swathe of local councillors and activists turfed out of their positions as well, because local councillors are the backbone of our activist base and everything we do. We can't allow that to happen. So that has to be the immediate priority. What thing do we need to put in place to ensure that in May our candidates up and down the country have the best chance of re-election? And then we have to learn the lessons of this defeat. We've got to look at our organisation, we've got to look at our policy making, and we've got to look at things like selections. We need to have an understanding as a party exactly what does a democratic party, how do we do selections right? Now, just prior to this general election, whatever day the general election was called, the weeks and months running up to that, the party knew a general election was on the cards. But what did we do? We spent it having divisive trigger ballots and deselection campaigns up and down the country in our seats, when we should have been focusing on getting our message out and getting on the doorstep. We knew there was a general election around the corner. We should have been focused on that, and instead we were voting on internal battle. We really have to get our focus back on the key, our priority to win a general election. If we can't win a general election, we can't bring about the change we need to make.
Just moving on to the subject of Brexit. For many people, Brexit seems to be something that it's done, it's finalised, it's going to be happening. But of course, we've got trade negotiations that will be going on throughout this year. What are your thoughts on positions that the Labour Party should take regarding these trade negotiations? And what are your general feelings about Brexit in general?
So I campaign for Remain. I still believe that remaining in the European Union is the best thing for the UK for a whole number of reasons. That's what I campaigned for. That's how I voted. But I also recognise that straight after that, actually, we ended up in a situation after the referendum where the Labour Party had large numbers of MPs representing constituencies that voted both Leave and voted Remain. Yeah, and that was a very difficult situation. And whereas the Conservatives had a very Leave bias to their MPs, Labour was divided. But there was also another situation that actually Labour wasn't in government. We weren't doing the negotiations. We weren't able to win a vote in Parliament. Actually, we had no real control or say in the process of what was going to happen. And if you look at Parliament now, we're not in government, we're not involved in the negotiations, and the Conservative majority now will make sure that whatever Boris Johnson wants to negotiate, he will pass through Parliament, and that will be where we're going. So we can either we have a choice. We can either just play politics and make noise and just to oppose what he's doing for the sake of opposing it, or actually, I think the bigger issue for us is actually we need to be getting out into our heartland, and we need to be understanding why people in Labour voting seats which have always voted Labour, then voted Leave and voted for the Conservatives, or why people who have always voted Labour voted Remain and then turned to Liberal Democrats or whoever. Yeah? We need to understand that, and we need to make that connection. And we need to be having the conversations that in those communities are really important to those people. So if people who are from generations and generations voting Labour suddenly turned off by Labour because of things like immigration, well, we need to be talking to them about that. And we need to be understanding their concerns, and we need to be reassuring them, and we need to make sure that our policies reflect the concerns of the people out there. And that's the bit we haven't done. And I think if we had done that better straight after the referendum, then we wouldn't have got triangulated in all these seats. Yeah? And we would have retained our connection with voters in those seats. But even now, that is something we absolutely must do. We have to understand if the so-called red wall has fallen. Yeah, well, we need to understand why it fell. And the concerns in one seat are not the same concerns in another. And we need to understand that, but we also need to be clear about what their concerns are, what made them vote in that way, and what we need to do as a national party to reflect that within our narrative.
We're coming towards the end of the podcast. It's been great to have you on, Gurinder. I'll be delighted to have you on again any other time you'd like to come on.
That's been fantastic, Will. I mean, I've really enjoyed it as well. I think one of the things I've learned over the last 2 times of running for the NEC is actually the best bit is going out there, talking to members, talking about ideas, and just engaging with members. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
It's not a problem. And I'd like to ask just one final question. Not very long ago, a couple of days ago, Terry Jones, who was, of course, a member of Monty Python, sadly died. And I wondered, do you have a favourite Monty Python moment, or do you have a favourite comic moment or TV series that makes you chuckle whenever you think of it?
A favourite? Oh gosh. I mean, there's so much, isn't there? And there's so much that him and the other Monty Python, that team that came together and created those sketches, it was unique, and they played off the strengths of each other. And I just think, I think 2 of them are gone now, and it's, they're a national institution. I think we haven't recognised them as much as we should have done. But I'd struggle to say one favourite, but you can watch that even today. And my son, he was over the Christmas, he actually watched it, and he was in fits of laughter. It's timeless, it's just amazing. So I wouldn't pick out one favourite, but it's just the whole thing, with the Monty Python sketch, but also a lot of the other stuff that those people did was just amazing work.
I think that is something that I certainly agree with, and I think most of our listeners would do. Thanks once again for coming on.
Thank you, Will.